Television, 652 rather, pardon me. I'm very excited to talk to the former ambassador to China, David Mulroney. Lovely to see you here on Breakfast Television.
Thank you for having me.
This is a very interesting read, first of all, this book. Congratulations. Your time you spent in Beijing, 3 years you said you lived there.
I did, from 2009 to 2012.
And obviously it had a huge impact on you. And then when you came back home to Canada, you saw the impact actually the Chinese culture is having here in Canada. So talk about your time and how all of a sudden that transferred sort of a very political positioning to a much more cultural and economic, I guess, benefit of Canada.
So when I got to China in 2009, and I'd worked there before in my career, but this was my first time as ambassador, it was, the economic crisis was deepening, and China was one of the only countries that had powered through it. So it stood there as a great success story. Everybody came to China and said, you can do no wrong. So the Chinese were very bullish. It was an interesting time to see China assert itself in its region and in the world, which posed some challenges. So it began to confront some of its neighbors like Japan and the Philippines and Vietnam, much more confident on the global stage, much more confident on issues like human rights. So it's a real challenge for countries like Canada to respond in ways that are friendly and engaging, but also make clear our position on human rights.
Certainly, and then when you sort of your time there, you come home to Canada and you begin to see all of a sudden these, I don't want to say hints of, but that they still have a very strong presence in our country.
So that's right, Bridget. So as important as China is as a country, the other thing that's happening is we're seeing Chinese people, voting with their feet. They're newly prosperous. They're interested in the world. So a third of our foreign students in Canada are from China. China is now the biggest tourist sending country in the world. There are more Chinese tourists than anywhere else, and they spend more money than anywhere else. And we've also seen wealthy Chinese people who are looking for a second address, a second place to live, and often that's Canada. So as I traveled across the country, I worked at the University of Toronto, but researching the book, I went to Butchart Gardens in Victoria, which is an iconic stop for all Chinese tourists. I talked to Clearwater Fine Foods in Halifax, which is selling live lobster in China. I was just seeing this at street level in Canada. China's having a really significant impact.
And and as a result, then there is much to be gathered from this book on how we can work with, how we can benefit from, how we can, I think, in our economy, we can prosper as a result of this sort of investment from the Chinese in Canadian places. And when you talk about homes and travel and tourism,
absolutely. For the first time in our history, we're used to a world in which our big security and economic issues are really resolved through our relationship with the United States. If we get that right, then we can sort of choose where to get involved. For the first time, China's engaging us. And we have to craft really smart policy responses to maximize the impact of Chinese investment, which we've seen significantly in Alberta in things like the oil sands, but we need to see Chinese investment, I think, in other sectors. We have a great trade relationship with China. But we've also got to think about how those policies connect. So, for example, I was often frustrated in Ottawa where you'd have one part of government saying, we need more tourists, we need more students, but they wouldn't talk to the people who issue visas. So it's smart, connected responses, understanding where China's going and why, and thinking about the appropriate Canadian response. We can manage our side of this big relationship.
When you say we can manage our side in this relationship, is it to say that our relationship with China, specifically the Chinese, is growing, that we're going to see a much more prospering community if we take it in the right direction?
That's very true, but the problem is this, that the government from about 2012 on, the federal government, has been largely silent about China. And the reason for that is I think they're accurately reading Canadian public opinion, because if you look at the opinion polling done by people like the Asia Pacific Foundation in Vancouver, you see that Canadians are a little bit uneasy. They're ambivalent. Sadly, a decreasing number of Canadians think we're an Asia Pacific country, and only about 10% harbor warm feelings about China.
Really?
That's not unreasonable. The rise of China also poses some challenges because, as I say, China in its region is being assertive with countries that we're very close to, like Japan. China and Canada see very differently on issues of human rights. So there are reasons why Canadians would be uneasy about this, but I think it's the role of government not to follow public opinion, but to lead it. And to have a discussion with Canadians about what's happening doesn't mean we have to compromise our values, but it does mean we have to be a lot smarter in terms of looking for opportunities to discuss things with the Chinese, thinking about how we present our positions, and trying to understand where China's going and why. And we're not doing enough of that.
Right, and all the while maintaining our integrity as a country.
Absolutely.
It's a great read. It's a wonderful book. Thank you so much for stopping by today. Middle Power, Middle Kingdom. The former ambassador to China, David Mulroney, in the House, talking about what we need to know about this situation. It affects all Canadians, and it's a great book. Congratulations, and for more information, breakfasttelevision.ca. Delighted to have you here. We're going to take a quick break. News, weather, traffic right after this.